you have a question or comment, perhaps you can get a pencil, piece of paper, write it down so that you're well organized, and when you're getting on the show, you take as little time as possible so that we can accommodate as many of you as we can. We ask only, first of all, you respect yourselves and then respect others, because we will not accept anything we deem that's not within our broadcast standards, but we encourage you to always be forceful with your point. Thank you all again for joining us. This is your voice in the community, thought that get results. You can also follow our live stream on our YouTube channel, a live video stream, our YouTube channel Vaughan Radio, and on our Facebook page at Vaughan Radio for the video streaming of this show. Thank you all again. Wonderful evening. Tonight, the Honorable Spencer Brand, good evening.
Good evening, Webbo, and a very pleasant good evening to my fellow panelists. Webbo, it's good to be back. You know, over the last few months, I've been pretty preoccupied with other things, so I would have asked for some time off based on your instructions, and I thought that that time was filled with all kind of activities, you know. So it's good to be back, Webbo. I'm delighted to be back. I want to say a very pleasant good evening to my fellow panelists. Good evening to all those who are listening and viewing this edition of Let's Talk. And I'm indeed delighted to be here to partake in tonight's discussion, Webbo.
Conrad Niall Liebert, good evening.
Good evening, Webbo, and a pleasant good evening to your hard-working staff here at Vaughan Radio, to my colleagues around the table, Mr. Brand and Mr. Stanley. Good evening, and to everyone into this program in the various means available. Webbo, it's truly a beautiful day on Ireland, and it's a beautiful evening, and I look forward to a very healthy discussion, Webbo, this evening. I thank you once again for having me.
Edric W. Stanley, good evening.
Good evening, Webbo, and good evening to my fellow panelists. Good evening to the people of St. Kitts, but more particularly, the gracious people of Nevis. Those who listen to us on the World Wide Web and throughout the Caribbean Basin. Well, of course, as I went in my car this morning, left early, I heard my name called. But I just didn't understand why and the content. Would you be so grateful to give us a small piece of it? Well,
you know,
if it is an imposition,
you are a real super heavyweight, right?
If it is a major imposition,
even at this age. Why does everybody feel that can con me? So, Mr. Brand, maybe he decided to welcome you back with a light moment, so he wants you to hear what I said about him. Anyway, so what I was doing, I was saying hello to Ted, because every now and then you think on your beginning and the people who help you through the years. And you know, Ted has done such great service to you know, to us here at Vaughan and the island as a whole. Those things that people know, and there are a lot of things that people don't know. So he, believe it or not, one of his favorite programs that I learned from him is not so much the heavyweight show. It is, right? But he likes to listen maybe to religious songs in the morning, to which you refer. And there's a particular song that I played over the years, and I sometimes, most of the time, I deliberately play it because of the lyrics. It is called Chord of the County. And Ted likes that song, and a host of other persons like it as well. And I hardly can say Ted in reference to Vaughan Radio and in a particularly heavyweight show, unless I say Edric W. Stanley. So I had to say that as well, to say hello to Edric, because I expressed similar sentiments, right? And I had promised you that about 2 or 3 weeks ago, when you keep mentioning something, I say, oh, it's okay, Edric, one of these days I'll make a comment. So maybe I could make it now. But with regards to Edric, I remember when we started out together, a lot of folks did what a lot of folks continue to do. To get something stopped or to undermine something, because we have a saying that we say in Nevis and other areas that nothing lasts. So they used to go by Edric's desk. You remember that famous desk, Mr. Brand?
Yes, I do.
People came from all over to visit to see what this desk is all about. And then when they see it, they say, oh my gosh, what a desk. Anyway, so they will go and they will discourage Edric and others from coming on the show. But I don't think they knew who they were talking to. And whenever anybody works with me, especially in the trenches, I'm a loyalist. And you could talk as much as you want. The only thing that I would advise you to do is to work with me. Because if you want me to do otherwise against the people who have worked with me all through the years, there is a cartoon, I think it's called Tom and Jerry, I'm not so sure. But I overheard two little girls, they couldn't be no more than between, well, they were under 12 anyway, and one got upset with the other. And I overheard one telling the other one, if you're waiting on me to tell you that means you will never know. So that's sometimes when it comes to people who work with me, that's the kind of mentality I have. So I don't know if you love the song The Chord of the County too.
Quite so.
Based on the lyrics.
Quite
So
so.
I did it for your listening pleasure and also for Ted. It's a powerful song,
Very powerful.
and you wouldn't believe the amount of people who loves the song. But in a democracy, there's always somebody, where there is love, on the other side of the ledger, is somebody who doesn't love, don't like it. And so they curse me and so when I play it. And that's fascinating to me too. So, that is what it was all about, Edric. Was it okay?
Well, like I said, I got up early this morning, and normally I would have the radio on, but based on what I intended to do, I left, and as I got in the car, turned the radio on, I heard just the last.
Your friend Melissa just told me you only wanted to hear it again. Anyway, so that is that. What else we got?
Webbo, where do we start? A lot has been happening, since I've been here last, and Webbo, let me go back a bit. In 2017, I would have campaigned to the people of St. Paul's, asking them to entrust their confidence in me as their representative for that election in 2017. I would have said to the people of St. Paul's that take a chance on me, give me an opportunity, and I would basically earn the rest. I believe, Webbo, that from 2017 until 2022, I would have sought to ensure that I deliver on the commitments that I would have made to the people in St. Paul's in that campaign of 2017. But there has been the argument that nothing has happened in St. Paul's. And I want to very briefly highlight just a few, because my position in this election of 2022 was a very simple one. I was basically running on my record and on my commitment to the people of St. Paul's. And before I came here, Webbo, I wrote down just a few things. Some of the things that I campaigned on in 2022 was the new water storage tank there in Hamilton, the water filtration system in Hamilton, 2 housing projects, one at Craddock Road and one at Hamilton. When we look at the transformation in Happy Hilali, in Chapel Street, Jew Street, the Methodist Church and the Anglican Rectory perimeter wall and those lovely landscaping. When you look at the collaboration between Minister Evelyn and I as it regards to the complete reconstruction, so to speak, of the netball complex. When we look at Craddock Road, the reconstruction of Craddock Road, as I said to the people of St. Paul's in 2017, give me a chance and I would own the rest. We had an election, Webbo, on the 12th of December 2022. And the people of St. Paul's would have gone to the polls and ensured, Webbo, that they overwhelmingly re-elect me as their representative. And Webbo, while some people feel that it wasn't a massive victory, when I did some simple calculation, it works out to over 200, almost 250% increase from 2017 until now. And I want to ask the question, which constituency, based on what normally takes place on the island of Nevis, would have seen nearly 250% increase? So I want to say from this rostrum, it's good to be back, and I want to thank the people of St. Paul's for reposing their trust and confidence in myself. I know that for the last 5 years, in the last dispensation, the entire island of Nevis and the world over really face a significant challenge as it regards to the COVID pandemic. We are still crawling our way out of that pandemic. And Webbo, I believe that the people of St. Paul's would recognize that over the next 5 years, there is some expectations, and it is my hope and my pledge and my commitment to ensure that those expectations are met. Webbo, I've sat and I've reflected on this election, and I've spent some very quiet moments after this election, and I realized that it seems to me that there is a double standard when it comes to CCM's victory versus the NRP victory. And you may ask why I say that. I say that, Webbo, because I won in St. Paul's in 2017 by 11 votes. I had to face an election petition back in 2017. Perhaps persons may have forgotten that. I won again in 2022, and I have been wrestling again with another election petition, this time increasing my margin by nearly 250%. But the NRP would have won in St. James's by 8 votes. And nobody is taking NRP to court in St. James's. There is no election petition with an 8-vote margin. It seems to me, Webbo, that the standard and the threshold for CCM is so high that unless you win by over 200 or 250 votes, you won't be challenged in court. My good friend Eric Evelyn the Honorable Eric Evelyn would have won in Gingerland by 200 and something votes. He was not challenged. The the NRP candidate in St. Thomas's would have won by over 200 votes. She was not challenged. And the NRP candidate in St. James's would have won by a mere 8 votes, and CCM chose not to challenge that. But here it is. The Premier of Nevis would have won by 147 votes. He was faced with an election petition. I would have won by 27. So it seems to me that the NRP has what I call a double standard here, that they need CCM to win by over 200 votes. And unless we win our seat by over 200 votes, we won't have to face an election petition. But they can win by 8 votes, and it is all right. However, in my reflection again, it appears to me that for the NRP to win an election, the modum of operandi appears to be that they must disenfranchise people. And why I say that? They continue to basically object across the board to hundreds of persons' names because they feel that the only way in which that they are going to win an election in this country is to disenfranchise people. And I want the people of Nevis to understand that. Once they win, it's all right. And if they don't win in a particular constituency, they must be willing to object and get as many persons off of the voters list in those constituencies in order for them to win. I want to say to the people of Nevis, Webbo, that the Concerned Citizen Movement Party is here for you. We will stand with you, and we will continue to do all that we must to develop this country. And I want to say to those persons who would have re-elect me in St. Paul's that they can rest assured that they have a representative that has their best interests at heart. I am not going to sit here, Webbo, and say that all is well. I would be lying. We of course have some challenges, but the people of St. Paul's and the people of Nevis by extension must be able to recognize that the Concerned Citizens Movement Party is the only political party on the island of Nevis that has their best interests at heart. And Webbo, I would pause there for the moment. I believe that the majority of persons, the persons who are reasonable, the persons who appreciate and understand the governance of the island of Nevis would recognize that the Concerned Citizens Movement Party is by far the best political organization to manage the affairs of the island of Nevis.
Well said, Mr. Brand. Let me say it's a pleasure to have you back.
Thank you. It's good to see you too. I've seen you for a little while.
It's been a while, yeah. And it looks like you've been somewhere outside, because you even seems to have a different complexion in some way or the other. Anyway, welcome back. It's good to have you again. And I want to say congratulations to you in winning the seat in St. Paul's. It truly wasn't no big surprise to me personally. Some would say, "Oh, Mr. Brand is a boy." He's not that at all. I always thought, especially from a particular standpoint, you know, when I observe the Public Works Department, I admire that in a very serious way. Before Mr. Brand, and long time before even then, it was a department that people had a lot to say about wastage, wasting time, people idling. I mean, a group is waiting for a generator for all day, you know, a lot of wastage, it seems like to me. And I think on observing what's going on in the Public Works Department, I say kudos to Mr. Brand. I think he have seriously revolutionized that department. And what I see is taking place in and around St. Paul's and throughout the whole island in terms of restoring a lot of the bridges and so forth. I think those works are excellent, and I think Mr. Brand is still, I think, one of the decent-minded politicians here on island. I believe he's committed to his job, and he's committed to people. He's not the only one, but I think he's one that I admire, and I mean, I could be wrong, really, but I think Mr. Brand does a good job.
I think I do as well.
I think Mr. Brand does a good job. But Mr. Brand, I'm not sure if you did get any details as to what you went to court for, or what you were taken to court for, because I think the public still needs to know a bit about that. I'm not sure if you did get any insight into that. I know that the petition was thrown out and the facts wasn't discussed, I suppose. I was not in court, but anything to say in that regard?
Well, let me answer you this way.
Briefly, if you
very briefly.
Yeah.
The argument that was put forward as it regards to the election petition that was filed against me was one, there was a number of objections that were not heard by the electoral office. Minister Spencer Brand does not run the electoral office. Why am I taking to court for a duty and a responsibility that I have no control over? That's one. It was alleged that, well, let me not say alleged. It was said that a number of persons who registered in October and November, names did not appear on the voters list for December. Now again, there is a process, but again, Naya, I do not have control over the compilation of the voters list. Why am I being taken to court for a duty and a responsibility that I don't have? It was also said, Naya, that a number of persons were not allowed to vote. And some of these persons, sadly, are deceased. I do not have control over who is allowed to vote or who is not allowed to vote. So those were basically the three pillars on which the election petition against me as the first respondent was filed. So it is appears as though that certain allegation was made against me, and I have no authority or no control or no influence over what the electoral office does or doesn't do. So I don't see why I was taken to court.
Okay, interesting, because just like the members of the public, I mean, we've been hearing a lot about the court case, but somehow we just didn't have an insight as to what's going on. Also, well, there's quite a lot of papers in front of you, Mr. Pan.
Well,
I'm not sure if you're ready to delve into them, because obviously it's something about the court.
Let me just ask this for the information of the public, Mr. Brand.
Yes.
Obviously, you being one of the respondents, and not everybody would have heard what the judgment was, because it was just yesterday, and some people use different sources, and I'm sure some people are using this avenue to find out the update. You were one of the respondents, and you were just outlining for Naya what the allegations were, or the charges were against you in the petition. So what happened?
Well,
and you were in court, right, correct?
I was in court yesterday.
So give us an idea of what happened.
Well, in
during the court, yes.
in the first instance, Webbo, reading the petition when it was filed against myself and Premier Brantley, strange enough, we did not even get to the crux of the petition, because the petition itself was just so bad. It was first thing, the petition was filed against me, for example. It was filed late. It was, and we picked that up very early, because when we started to count, it's about, wait, the election was on the 12th, and based on the law, the petition against me had to be filed by a particular date, and that date was the 9th of January. And we run the numbers, we dissected the numbers, and no matter how we cut it, shape it, spin it, we were getting the 9th. So that was the first thing that we saw. Another thing that we picked up was when you file an election petition, you really have to file a security with the election petition. We realized that that wasn't done. So even before you get to the meat of the election petition, there were just certain things that were just out of order. So we moved the court to have the election petitions struck out, because it was just bad. It was just not in confirmation with the law. And we made our argument, and yesterday the judge basically agreed with our argument that the election petitions did not meet the requirement of what an election petition ought to be. And while I'm hearing that people are afraid to have the case heard and so on and so forth, if you are going to move the court, because what these election petitions are seeking to do really is to try and find a back door into changing the government on the island of Nevis. So if you are trying to go through that, what I call nuclear option, you must do whatever you are doing properly and in order and when you, and in the time that you're supposed to do it. And we found Premier Brantley had some similar issues with his election petition. Certain things was not done properly, certain things was not, and that was the basis on which the court would have ruled that both election petition to be tossed out.
In essence, that means what? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Stanley.
This is clearly a colossal vacuum that was created regarding leadership, meaning the absence.
Okay, well, Mr. Stanley, I thought you had a question for Mr. Brand.
Okay.
But let me just, I'll get back to you. But Mr. Brand,
Yes.
again, just for clarification and information for the public who might not have gotten the details. So it was struck out, both petitions, the one against you, the one against Mr. Brantley.
Yes.
So, and the judgment said that costs were awarded. That means what?
But cost, Webbo, was indeed awarded. Either, and that cost would either be agreed upon by the sides or assessed by the court. So I am of the view that the lawyers who would have worked on this case, and Webbo, I am telling you, I'm hearing some serious numbers. I am hearing some serious numbers as it regards to costs. And the kind of lawyers that I saw that were involved in this case, these lawyers are going to, in my mind, demand what their costs are due to them. I was intrigued, Webbo, to see that the federal government's position on this was in my mind, a very hardline position, because the federal government would have ensured that all of their functionaries were well represented, and that for me is a clear signal that the federal government was not taking this election petition lightly either. And the representation of the functionaries of the federal government, the Electoral Commission, the supervisor of election, the presiding officers, the returning officers, I thought that the federal government basically took a very hardline approach, and the court have awarded costs. The costs would either be, like I said, agreed upon by both sides or assessed by the court. And in my mind, Webbo, based on the numbers that I'm hearing, it is not going to be a small number at all.
Meaning that the parties that
Loss would have to pay. Well, not me personally, because the lawyers are the one who would be paid. Because it's neither here nor there for me. Because it's not a cost for me personally, you know. But once the lawyers are paid for the time and the effort that they would have put in, then that's fine with me.
Yes, Mr. Stanley.
Well, I, from day one, stated that there is no case, and as a result, the very first utterance coming from the side of Mr. Brand and Dr. Mark Brantley should be for the case to be struck out. There is no bearing, and the case had no standing from my vantage point. And as a consequence, they were wasting the court's time. Fortunately, Mr. Brand brought up the issue of cost, and he has insinuated that it's going to be high, which drew simply because I stated that lawyers work for a pretty penny, and it could be at the very least maybe $10,000 an hour.
Never done so.
At the same time, having some experience in that regard, I had an accident as a boy, and when the price was told to me about the cost for legal representation per hour,
Change your mind?
I almost, but at the same time, I had no choice. The case had to go forward. I was told that I had the right to, in fact, ask for a replacement of my vehicle. We won the first case, and because of the cost, I said, I'm not going back to court. I had the right in my hand, but I didn't go back to court. I had another case, and because of the cost, the legal cost, I decided not to chance it, and therefore got my right in my hand, and I forego that right. And because I attempt to put a price on the possible legal fees, I draw condemnation from a caller. And I would hope that she would not be chastised. Well, she was chastised the second round, but she called and said, I'm a dangerous man. I want to know what danger I pose to this particular caller. But let's put that aside, Webbo. Based on my vantage point, I felt that the case, the petition, had no bearing, and therefore it should be struck out forthwith. Fortunately, based on what I said here, two callers, and I said I have nothing to do with the case. At the same time, a person mentioned, Edric, did you sleep with the judge or had dinner with the judge? I said, no. And I can't tell you how the judgment was going to be handed down. But again, from my vantage point, I knew that they were wasting the court's time, and therefore they should never have gone to court with this petition, simply because they weren't advised properly, and had they been given proper legal advice, they would have realized that the election was over on the 12th, and therefore go back to the drawing board and come up with another plan to win 5 years later. But instead of that, they just wanted to get a victory, which they couldn't have at the polls, but through the back door. It couldn't happen, it didn't happen. But again, I made mention that I have no understanding. Well, I shouldn't put it that way. I have not met with the judge, and I do not know what the judgment would be. It could very well that something could go on where the judge would hand down a ruling against Mr. Brand and Dr. Brantley. But we waited, and we were fortunate that the case came down, the judgment came down in Mr. Brand's favor and Dr. Brantley's favor. As a result, I had to declare here that I belong to no party. And so I reiterated that because I belong to no party, I have no dog in the fight in the true sense of the word. But from my vantage point, I said that based on what I heard while I was in the court, I made inferences from what the judge stated, and I came up with a conclusion that the judgment would be handed down against the petitioners. And so, to my amazement, the judge handed down the judgment. And I hope that they would learn and they would bring about proper leadership, get good lawyers to advise them properly, and to avoid the embarrassment of a judgment which was uncalled for. They could have avoided it. The case had no standing, and consequently, the judge handed down a ruling against them. Now,
Naya.
Well, it's a bit surprising that the NRP was quite willing to go through with this case, even though there was a question about procedural requirements in terms of them meeting the procedural requirements. We know the court is a cold and pretty harsh place, really. There's not much in the court known to be sympathy or sympathetic about anything. This is a very serious matter, and I think Brand put it right when Mr. Brand said, you are effectively trying to remove a sitting government. And I can't see, if time has passed and for some reason you are not meeting the procedural requirements, accompanying documents and so forth, why they decide to go through with this case. The question is whether or not that gesture would be good for them going forward or bad for them. I think they took a huge gamble, It's a sad feeling in a sense that I would have liked to hear the debates on the case, but to be shut out at the very initial stage, that means somebody have not been doing their job properly. The lawyers has been, I hate to use that word, incompetent or not willing to do the necessary research to meet the requirements. There's something that went wrong there, and that to me is almost embarrassing in a sense that you have such a case at hand where the consequence can be you can remove a sitting government and you're not meeting the procedural requirements. that seems to be like a high level of irresponsibility, you know, from the lawyer's point of view, because I believe it's their advice why probably the NRP take the plunge. And yes, of course, I suppose they would have to pay a big fine, but I am still wondering what the effect of this gesture would be going forward if the NRP thought that this would increase their popularity going forward, probably in the next 5 years, or it would turn out to be a situation whereby people tend to lose what they were seeing in them maybe prior to this last election. I think they took a risk there, and they should have, after realizing, because the lawyers know, they probably was hoping that, well, certain things would go through. It doesn't work that way. I know on the other side, Mark Bantley himself is quite a sharp-minded lawyer, and you would really have to put things in place. You would have to put things in place to pass that gate. You was not even let inside so that you can have your time, that you can, you know, seek for standing, that point where, you know, standing is required, or even go to discuss the facts. It was a serious gesture in futility, really. It shouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen, and it becoming a part of our political culture, it looks like. I would discourage it to a great extent when you cannot find any reason to basically remove the government, but you're going to attempt a gesture, and you have not put things in place to do that, and you went through with it, and so it doesn't look good for the NRP in this case at all. It doesn't look good for the NRP in this case at all, and so at this point I would encourage that the people settle down and we get on with life here in Nevis. As far as I check, I'm not sure if there could be an appeal. I think natural justice will always offer an appeal. I'm not sure, but I hope that they would probably not go along that path, and let the island just settle down. Let the island settle down so that, you know, some kind of healing can take place going forward.
The election was over on the 12th of December, and it was judicially damning based on the judge's ruling. And they're not ready for prime time. I repeat, there is an absence of leadership, and there is an absence of good counsel, and consequently, they're not ready for prime time. Because of that, and because of what I've said, I drew ire from this caller, and I hope, based on what Mr. Brand has uttered here, that caller would be given the facts a second time. They should have not gone through with this case simply because the election was over on the 12th of December. But because they wanted to prolong and to, I would say, give their supporters some kind of hope, with a damning judgment from the judge, they were able to prolong this as if there was still an election going on.
Naya and Edric, the argument that you made, what if someone were to suggest to you or ask you if you had the same sentiments when Mr. Brantley challenged a few years, when was it, 2011?
Yes.
Yeah, 2011. What if someone were to ask you that? You will say what, Naya?
If I have the same sentiments?
Right. You indicated that based on the information that came forth as a consequence, they ought not to have carried through with that case.
Yes.
And you said it was, based on the information, it was clear.
Yeah.
So, I'm asking, what if someone were to say to you, would you have suggested the same thing to Mr. Brantley when Mr. Brantley challenged?
Yes, Webbo, but it's a little different in a sense, because we are dealing with like procedural requirements. If we had get to the point back there where the court would have, the other side would have asked for the petition to be thrown out, and the court would have realized, well, the procedural requirements was not met, I would have been saying the same thing I'm saying here, that it's almost embarrassing that maybe there is a case to be answered too. Maybe there are facts that is worthy to be discussed and debated in court, maybe. But at this initial stage, you have not met the procedural requirements. You're not going nowhere. You're simply not going nowhere. You're not going to make it anywhere in that case. So if that had happened back then, the NRP probably would have come up, their lawyers would have examined the procedural requirements and said, well, the CCM lawyers failed too. And the judge actually believed that, or, determined the petition would be thrown out. I would have felt the same. I would have thought is it incompetence? I don't want to say that, but why is it learned lawyers does not meet the requirements of the court in order to put the case before the court? It's an initial step that if you fail to make that step, you're not going nowhere. And that's why I say they should not, if they realized they were outside the merits of the requirements, they should not have gone forward with the case.
Well, this is absolutely a blunder in terms of advice or the lack thereof on the part of the leadership. You got this big case in their view. Pull your people together and ask for competent advice, good legal advice, before you go forward. But they put the cart before the horse. And the two cases are like apples and oranges. The one of 2011 and the one of February 15th. Apples and oranges. As a result, they have no standing. The case had no standing. And you and I attempted to debate it here, but you kept saying there must be some way that a hearing will come about.
No.
You didn't say it in so many words, but you kept saying that. I kept saying the very statement that would come from Dr. Brantley's side and Honorable Senator Brand's side. My Lord, this case has no standing and therefore strike it out. We're going around and begin on first base. But the judge saw it and they didn't get on first base. He handed down a judgment based on the fact that it wasn't properly filed in the case of Dr. Bartlett's, and in the case of J.D. Keynes's, the case was filed 1 day late. I said it here. But you keep pushing the envelope.
Right. So the other thing I find is interesting, Naya. I don't know whether or not one is minded to go that deep into it. But you mentioned that you would have liked to have heard the debate on the case.
Yes.
I keep wondering what were the issues, and I keep asking. And I read the petition, so maybe you can, advise me or inform me as to what they are. I'm not being facetious.
I know, but I can't. And that's why I asked Mr. Brown about the paper he got in front of him, and if he did get to the point of finding out why he went to the court, why he was in court.
Well, we knew why we went to the court.
I asked him that because the public don't know. The public doesn't know the facts. I mean, what is written on the suit and all that.
Well, to work with me, I am abreast, right? One of the main things is that there were, and I think Mr. Brand was referring to it earlier, some 150 something or over 100 names that Mr. Brand that were objected to,
Right.
and a proper hearing as set out in the electoral laws was not held, and hence why Mr. Foy, who is a registration officer, was taken to court.
Right.
So that seems to me was one of the major things, and I think Mr. Brand also had made some reference to that included in those names were people who were dead. And there's an allegation, for instance, that these people were denied the right to vote and so on and so forth. So, well, my question is Naya, is whether or not you were saying that's the essence of the debate that you wanted to hear, because that seems to be, and if you're out there and the main issues, you can let us know, we can discuss it of to what it is, because we are done so many. I don't know if Naya, I think you were on the panel then, and we have done so many discussions on these electoral laws and procedures and stuff like that. Almost the entire public of St. Kitts and Nevis perhaps can give you a lesson
Yes.
on those things in terms of registration, and you have to have a hearing by such a time and be objected to, and you have to be registered for the process of about 2 months before you actually get on the list after the procedure and so on and so forth. So that seems to me as if the area that was going to be challenged.
Right.
And I think I remember saying that I remember in the 2011 saga, days before the election, people were in court fighting.
The very day of the election.
Oh, so there you go.
The very day of the election.
And trying to see whether or not they can stay on the list or get back the name on the list or get the name off the list and so on, because it seems to me that was of the essence.
Yes.
Very significant that you get these things done before the election.
Yes.
So now that's the area you were on.
Yeah. But and that's why I said, Webbo, I would have liked to hear the debate, because if we on the CCM side, it seems that
okay. Let's see. I asked for help. Maybe help is on the way. Hello. Good evening.
Good evening, Webbo.
Yes.
Good evening, Naya. Good evening,
Evening.
Stanley.
Evening.
Mr. Stanley.
Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Your horse has come home again.
Quite so.
Mr. Stanley, You tell Webbo thanks already? Hello, Mr. Stanley.
I'm listening.
You tell Webbo thanks already?
You got to be very specific.
Webbo,
So many things I told Webbo thanks for already.
Webbo,
Yes,
could you please tell Mr. Stanley you're welcome?
you're welcome.
Mr. Stanley,
I'm listening.
Webbo persuaded you not to bother with your cousin about taking your house out of the race. And it's a good thing you didn't.
No, the horse
I see your house have come home again.
will always come home.
My friend, you hit it nail on the head this time.
I always do, but not in your opinion.
Good evening.
You know, maybe it's time for a light moment. You know, Edric, I met with your cousin again. I met up with him. And he and I agreed. You and him might be cousins. But he and I tighter than you and him.
I don't have a problem with that, you know.
No, I
Webbo?
didn't say you have a problem. I was just giving you information.
Well, I'm saying to you, I should have taken him off of that ship when I left.
Stanley, you didn't leave. You were thrown overboard. You're
Well,
trying to change the now.
Yeah, well, I was going to backtrack until I was kicked off the ship.
Yes.
And he should have been kicked off at the same time.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, Naya.
If I can rewind my mind a little bit.
Yeah. Yes. Go on.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. We would.
Oh, yes, the point I was making is that, like,
substantive matter.
Yeah, substantive matter. I mean, from the CCM point of view, we have heard what Mr. Banner said, and we listen to the premier shows sometimes, and he has expressed quite a lot of what Mr. Banner said as it relates to the facts. So what is interesting to me, you know, if the CCM feels so certain as to their stand on the facts, what would be the argument of the other side? I mean, to me, it would have been a debate to listen to. And like any debate, I like to listen to the debate. So, I mean, I would have liked to hear the substantial facts being debated in court.
You know, Naya, let me say this, right?
I would have liked to hear that.
Yes. I'll say two things. An election petition is a creature by itself, right? It's you know, I sat in the court there as up in the dock as if I was some common criminal, and I listened to all the lawyers, and I said, but this thing is serious business. You understand what I'm telling you? This is serious business. And I listened to the judge. This was serious business.
Yeah.
Right? We was very confident that we would have had this outcome because of the law for an election petition is very specific. Very specific. It said that it must be filed between 21 days, and it tells you exactly how to count the days. Very plain, very straightforward, very simple.
But
Right?
might I just say also, but so is the procedure with the electoral laws.
Yes.
They have they are very specific.
Yes.
They say how many at what period of time you're allowed to register.
Exactly.
They give you a period of time in which to have objections,
Right.
and etc. In my view, when you look at those things, to me, you didn't have to have legal education to read the Constitution or the electoral laws if it says that if you feel aggrieved, then you must do this within 5 days or 10 days or 21 days. and then you must do this and you must do that. And even the substantive matter, where the names that were supposed to be objected to, it'll be interesting to hear what is the argument in it. Did the registration officer not give a hearing, a date? Did people not show up? And if he did not give a date, is there not a remedy before, etc., etc., etc.? So those things lay out the procedures. And when you go to be adjudicated on these matters, what the adjudicator does, they look at the law,
Exactly.
the guidelines, the process, the procedure, and then they see whether they will be met or not. And that is what happened when we were discussing the 2011 case.
All about procedures.
All about the procedures,
All about procedures.
and whether a person had malintent when they did or didn't do certain things, etc. So, again, as I said, I find that in some instances, with certain issues, there's a lot of noise and cussing, and sometimes we don't take the time because we probably have a certain motive. And that is why, for instance, I told Mr. Brand, so that the public who have not heard yet, and he was a party to the proceedings, to tell us from his perspective basically what happened. One of the things I would like, and I understand that they don't know as yet, everybody keeps saying it's going to be a hefty sum. But nobody is giving any even ballpark figure. Mr. Brand said this is his second go around, you know, but he is not telling us what his first go around was like,
Well,
in terms of that cost. Let me get this. Good evening, thank you for holding. Good evening, you're on. Good evening, you're on the air.
Panel.
Yes,
Good evening.
could you listen to the telephone? You will hear us.
Yes. I just wanted to put another spin on the table tonight. Mr. Herbert and I wanted to know what would be an argument put forward if the case was to go forward. Now, we spoke about the procedures and the rules and regulations governing this country. Now, one point stands out in the Brantley-Bartlett petition, where it stated that all ballot boxes should not be stored with the police stations. Now, 40 years into independence, who is responsible for security of all ballot boxes after an election? Why would you want to challenge that law that states that all ballots and all boxes must be secured at all police stations in all parishes where elections was conducted? So I would like to hear Mr. Nayer's take on that point in the Brantley and Bartlett petition.
Caller, might I ask you a question for my own clarification?
Yes, sir.
You are suggesting that that was a part of the challenge that Dr. Bartlett had, that the ballots are stored at the police station and they ought not to?
Yes, that was one of the points in the petition that she is challenging, that the police have no right to be securing the ballot boxes. So, who else is responsible for security in the Federation and in our country?
Okay, so I think, don't go yet. Now, you wanted to ask something?
I'm a bit confused, actually.
So can you like to ask a question for
I would like him to repeat, please, if you don't mind. I would like him to repeat what he has asked of me.
As part of the petition,
Great, thank you.
you wanted to know what would be the argument going forward.
Yes.
So I'm putting you a point that came out of the petition
Okay.
that you wanted to hear the arguments about. So I'm stating that one of the main points in the Brantley-Bartley petition was that she is challenging that the ballot boxes, the ballots, and all electoral tools and materials should not be stored at any police station. So, is that the argument and thing you wanted to hear in the court to be challenged? Is that something to be challenged when you know for 40 years we are independent? Those are our rules and laws and constitution, that the police is the final security point after an election. So, is that what you want to hear argued? Does that make sense to go forward with the petition?
Well, I'm hearing it from you. What would excite me? What would be the response of the lawyers on that matter? You know, a debate is an exchange, and the exchange does excite me really. I hope that answers your question.
But if I'm understanding the caller, Donaya, why would you want that Mr. Brantley and Mr. Brand to be answering why the law is made up like that?
Well, you see, Webbo, as I said, we're hearing it from him. But these people employ high-flying lawyers who decide to go and challenge that. They decide to go and challenge that. And so I would like to hear what are they saying.
Right.
If the law states absolutely clear, let the police hold the ballot box and other...
So you would
Right.
like us to give an explanation as to why they lost what he said?
So here's
Why would they pick up such a case when the law is so clear?
Yeah, right. So here's what I am picking up from the caller, and caller, you can correct me if I'm wrong. The caller wants to know, not that there shouldn't be a debate in it, but why should Mr. Brand and Mr. Brantley, after winning an election on the laws that are being provided, why should they have to go, waste their time, whatever it is, and so on, to hear a debate on that?
Well, you see, that's the issue of standing. They might have gotten through this gate of accepting the petition, but now in terms of having standing in court, because you cannot come in court to fight what the law is. So that was the other hurdle.
So that is what...
Whether or not they would have got standing in court.
Well, walk with me. That is what the callers seem to be asking you. You said you wanted to hear the debate in it.
Yeah.
So the caller is asking you, if you really and truly wanted Mr. Brantley and Mr. Brand to go stand up to defend, and to defend that? Caller, am I correct?
Yes, sir. Exactly.
Well, look, to me, Webbo, standing up to defend that is defending the democratic process and the law of the land.
Well, let me ask you
what's wrong
this.
with that?
What if someone broke Mr. Stanley's store?
Yeah.
And you knew nothing about it, but you had to go to explain why they broke Mr. Stanley's store. That makes any sense to you?
No, it doesn't make any sense.
They need to go to find the person who broke it to let them explain.
Yes.
So that seems to be, like I said, you see, I think the caller is asking a deep question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very deep.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Yeah,
Have a good
okay.
night.
All right, thanks. That's
But as the caller said, he added another dimension to it, which is interesting, because if you find yourself in court and the other side gets standing, then you find yourself in court and have to answer certain things. I mean, standing is another sifter. You got to pass through before you get to the facts.
You're on the air. Good evening.
Good evening, Webbo.
Yes.
My opening statement, I want to thank God for the Federation of St. Navies. Today is the National Day of Prayer, and I myself call in and do my contribution with saying a prayer, and I would like to see this country move on politically and religiously with our party and our leaders to try to do well when they elect for the people, and when the people elect them. Now, Webbo, my question, those court cases, right, they come against Patricia Bartlett and I think J.D. King. Yes,
That's
the court
correct.
case come against the case, so I got to the court case, right?
That's correct.
So who is responsible for the charges for the court case? Because is the party or them personally got to pay this money?
Maybe both.
That's my question. No, you're expert. So that's my question to you all. Stanley, good night.
Good night.
All right, man. Take care.
Okay, thank you. Now let's get the answer because the caller has identified you as the expert in these things.
Well, it's going to come from the side, the NRP side, I suppose, and their supporters. I understand money was collected on the street. I don't know how much money, but somebody got to pay the bill. I don't know where the money's going to come from, Webbo.
Okay.
You know, but it's coming from the NRP side, I suppose.
Okay, let me get a break. This is Thought That Get Results. Conrad Nye Liber, Edric W. Stanley, the Honorable Spencer Brand. Your phone calls on 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. We're back after these.
With all the power from the tower, this is the powerhouse of the Eastern Caribbean, VON Radio, from the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis.
Builders Paradise is offering a large variety of floor and wall tiles at very competitive prices. Builders Paradise has over 2 million pieces in stock, lots of different styles to choose from. Whether you're renovating or tiling a new house, Builders Paradise has what you need. Wow! Oh, and remember, we're open all day Saturday to serve you better. This is something that you can't refuse. Visit Builders Paradise today at the C.A. Paul Southwell Industrial Site in St. Kitts or call them at 466-4938.
Sugar City, St. Kitts. Keep it sweet. Keep listening to Vaughn.
Back in this episode of Thought That Get Results with the Honorable Spencer Brand, Conrad Nye Liber, Edric W. Stanley. Your phone calls on 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. By the way, I think it was last week I'd given Mr. Stanley a message to give to you, Mr. Brand, that a police officer had met me and told me to to raise on the program that they would like to know where Miss where we called by Miss Butler, that's in Bath.
In Bath, yes.
As you come up the hill
Yes.
to when you reach to turn up to Jericho Road, you would like to know when that road will be patched, not dug up and done again, because he understands, the resources and so on. So I'd ask Mr. Stanley to convey the message to you, because when a police tell you to do something, work with them. So you're here now, so that's the message or the question.
Well, let me say this. We suffered a fire at the asphalt plant in December last year, and that would have hampered our road maintenance program. So all throughout the island of Nevis, I think that the general public would have been very observant in that there appears to have been a number of potholes that have not been filled. We are in the process of getting the repairs sorted out. But in the meantime, you know that we have on island Surrey Paving doing some work from Cliff Dwellers to Nisbets. And because of the contractual arrangement, they would have brought in, so to speak, or they had in their storeroom, so to speak, certain mechanism that could have heated the oil. Actually, they would have used that mechanism just a couple of days ago and over the weekend to heat some oil to do a section of the road from Cliff Dwellers area to just before you reach the water taxi pier. So they was able to do that. We took the opportunity, Webbo, to also mix some asphalt for the island of Nevis, where we are presently doing some patching. I think we did the bypass road and a few other areas. To answer your question directly, Webbo, we hope to get that done very shortly. But I want to go a bit further. That there's been a lot of talk about roads. When this particular road is going to be done, if it's going to be done. I want to say, Webbo, to the people of Nevis that there continue to be an unprecedented demand for road improvement, for road construction, for new roads, for but I want to say also, Webbo, that they can be assured that these roads would be done. I know that we are facing some economic and financial constraint, but I want to assure the people of Nevis that these roads will be done. The filling of the potholes in the specific area that you speak about and throughout Nevis, all of those will be done. But I want the general public to ask themselves a question. The NRP have said that we are doing too much of roads. They have asked, why are we doing so much roads? But I want to ask the general public, do they feel that if the NRP were to be in government, that roads would be done? Because they themselves would have said to the people of Nevis that we don't need to do any roads, or we should not be doing any roads. So I think, Webbo, that the people of Nevis and the police officer who you would have spoken about, he can be assured that under the CCM government we will get our roads done. We will continue our road maintenance program. We will ensure that these potholes, and I know that we started doing some today, we would have taken the unconventional step of using even concrete in trying to patch some of these potholes, because we realized that the motoring public needed some relief. So I want to say to that police officer, I want to say to the people of Nevis, that these potholes will be filled. We are in the process of filling them. We were able to collaborate with Surrey Paving and get some heating of the oil done over the last few days. Surrey Paving would have done some asphalting today, and like I said, we would have used the opportunity to fill some potholes today as well. But the general public can be rest assured that we will get those potholes filled and we will continue our road rehabilitation project. I must ask yourself the question, if it were the NRP, because they have said that we are doing too much of roads, but it is the demand and it is the will and the wishes of the people of Nevis. So we will get all of it done, Webbo.
You mentioned Surrey Paving. The asphalt plant,
yes.
Did it affect Surrey Paving? Was it Public Works who used to supply?
Yes. Yes.
But, okay, so that was affected too.
Yes,
to some degree.
It was affected to some degree. I think they had maybe based on their schedule, they had a slight delay, but they was able to bring in a particular piece of equipment, a heating. It was basically the burner.
Mr. Brand, let me take this. We'll go back to it. You're on the air. Good evening.
Hello, good evening.
Yes.
Good evening to Mr. Brand. I forgot to say good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, on the first go around. Anyway, Mr. Brand, I'd like to admonish you to keep your eye on your book. Sure and steadfast should be your motto. Forget about the NRP. They don't seem to be getting anything right. Yes. Back to Mr. Herbert.
Yes.
Webbo,
yes.
For in the interest of the public, I was thinking if you could get maybe a couple of legal experts to shed some light and some of the matters that the NRP had for their election petition, something like discuss the matter of the amount of names that they said that they brought forward, they objected to, and they didn't have a hearing. Things like that, you know. What is there maybe a couple of legal luminaries who could shed some light for the education of the general public?
Yeah.
Caller, if I may.
Yes, go on.
Let me interject here, caller. We have heard that argument about these objections, right? I think that the people of Nevis are forgetting that we had an election in August on that same list, you know, and it was pretty fine. Nobody had any problems with the outcome of the election in August. So all of a sudden, they find that they have lost the local election in December.
Hold on, Mr. Brand. Caller, you like to finish up, and then Mr. Brand.
Yeah, I was saying all is considered, but we still from the public, you know. I mean, get to know what the legal fellows think about some of these things, you know. I mean, Mr. Brand made a point there that is a point you reckon, you know, and I really would like to, because this matter was thrown out because of bad procedure. We didn't get the education that could have come from the and only when these things happen we kind of get to find out about them, the general public, because people don't really take up the Constitution and go through it, like, you know, studying it. Not everybody does that.
You know, caller, I get you. It's a good idea and suggestion, but you know, we will always keep trying, and sometimes we don't get something done is not for want of trying. But I know you understand the society, that a lot of people do not want to engage. For instance, as you make your contribution on different matters. Sometimes you're challenged, you know, on your view, but you know, like a good debate. So a lot of people who are very bright and very knowledgeable and so on, they don't want to participate in this way. And so we're left with, you know, we do what you can. Yeah, well, and one of the areas that we can get good information from, as you mentioned, lawyers, people who have served as supervisory election, like Mr. Bailey, for instance, who knows and things like that. So I don't mind. Mr. Bailey normally cooperates and he doesn't mind. So I'll ask him and see what he says to shed some light and that. Yeah. And you know, sometimes you try to do things like this, and people go in with preconceived notions. They don't enter it with an open mind. Mm-hmm. You know, they would start to complain, "Oh, is Bailey getting to do this?" and that kind of thing. You know. Yeah, well, I could teach you a lesson or two, having been around for a couple decades, and it's no easy and no accident, and it's not for style that we do talk that get results.
Yes.
Yeah, when we realize that it's not heading that way, we just, you know.
The record is there to show.
Yes. Okay, so thank you for the suggestion.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Brand, you could go ahead now at the point you were making.
Yes, I was just telling the caller that lest we forget that we had an election in August. Practically the same voters list. The Concerned Citizen Movement won all federal seats on that list in August. And there wasn't any election petition, there wasn't anything moved the court, there wasn't any problems, or there wasn't any issue. Come to the local election, August, September, October, November, December, 4 months after, and everything is wrong. The same list. And we must...
Mr. Brenner, I'll interrupt you again, but hold your thought. You're on the air. Good evening.
Good evening, Webbo.
Yes. Okay, caller, could you listen to the phone?
Just 1 second. What? Okay. Okay, Mr. Webbo.
Yes.
The caller there was speaking about the legal thing. I thought you said that Mr. Ted going to be on your program tonight.
No, well, that's what you thought. What I was doing, I was saying hello to Ted and saying that we miss him.
Oh, because I now went to sleep and I ain't hear your voice. I thought you said that this morning that Mr. Ted going to be on your program. Because where the caller was saying that the legal man and no Ted without digging and that. Me not laugh with you.
That's a good light moment. The
other light one, keep out my mother vessel. Keep out my mother vessel. I'm not going to joke with you.
Oh, okay. All right. I got you.
I guess you know what I'm talking to. But anyway, I mean, that's what I call it. Ted, I think Ted will step on that one there for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Ted has done such great service.
Oh yeah, definitely. I know that. But I went to sleep and I don't hear him, and when I hear that caller,
you went to sleep, you didn't hear him, and
Ted don't come on and I don't hear it.
So you figure that in your. I got you. When you sleep, it's a lot of things has happened.
I don't know you.
All right, I got you.
All right, Mr. Webbo.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
You as well. Yes, Mr. Brand.
Yeah, Webbo, I was simply making the point that we had an election here, a federal election in August, practically the same voters list, and then 4 months later, this NRP would have lost that federal election. We would have won all 3 federal seats, and no issue. And I think we find it very strange that using practically the same list and them losing again, they have now find themselves taking this route. I think that the previous caller before, I probably need to take his advice to keep our eyes in our books, because you just can't seem to understand it.
Well, but it looked like other people was looking forward to the debate too. The caller, not the one before, but the one before, seemed like he was looking forward to a debate.
Yeah, but I understand that. But we've been sued a couple of times, and in the suit, they refer to things about me that even the lawyers on the other side want to know what that has to do with that. And then all it amounted to is harassment. You would like to hear debate. But my point is that Mr. Brand is here. Why does Mr. Brand have to go to sit down to answer to why they made this rule that the police should take care of the boxes? It's okay, well and good that you want to hear that, but you have no mercy with Mr. Brand? Well, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this, Mr. Naya. Let me ask you this. You ran before, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay.
For good government. Naya for good government.
Naya for good government. Right. Now, when you were running and you lost the election, and somebody said, I don't like that rule or that procedure that they have. And since Naya was running in St. John's, he should be able to come and say why the rule is like that. And you have your business to tend to every day. But you got to go to court to sit down to answer something you know nothing about. You would appreciate that?
If it makes it into the courtroom, the court demands that I come to court. Will I have a choice?
Walk with me. My question to you is, would you appreciate that?
I probably wouldn't appreciate that.
Okay. So that is what the point is.
Yeah.
Right? It's all well and good that you want to hear this thing. But why should they have to be the sacrificial lamb, so to speak, and you wouldn't want to be?
That is said in a kind of way which I probably, would contemplate in a different way, in a sense. Mr. Brand, elected representative of the people, and if anything need to be clarified, he shouldn't have to feel like a sacrificial lamb if he has to stand in court to clarify it.
Yeah, but I don't know if you get it, If he were
accused, I believe I get it.
With me, if he were accused, Mr. Brand, of doing some hanky-panky to aid him in winning the election, that's a different matter.
That's a totally different matter.
But you're not accused of that. You're not accused of anything.
So basically you're saying maybe Mr. Brand shouldn't have been, but electoral officials should be the one.
If you're arguing that you would like to hear a debate on these matters and so on and so forth, minus these people, that's a different matter. Like the caller said, maybe we should have some lawyers in and...
Oh no, not minus these people, Webbo. Not minus, because even the caller said that the fact that it was thrown out that early, we miss that the education aspect of the case.
Yeah, you're not working with me. See what I'm saying?
Okay, I'll try.
Having the debate on the particular issue is one thing.
Good.
Yes.
But involving somebody else who had nothing to do with it, so that people can then have certain perception that they did something. Because the truth is that I think a lot of people think that both Mr. Brantley and Mr. Brand, who were the winners of the election, that they did something.
I see where you're coming from.
You got me now?
I see where you're coming from, yes.
Okay, so, well, if Ted were here, I would have said to Ted, how did I do?
Well, I see where you're coming from.
So I'm making sense.
I see where you're coming from.
But you don't...
But you see, we know this is an election petition case, one that challenged the apparent winners or the perceived winners of an election. I lost my train of thought, so I did, Webbo. Sorry about that. Yeah, I did.
It happens.
It happens.
It happens. My folks, it's a light moment. My folks, when that happened, they call me Barry White.
Oh.
Okay, what else we got?
Well, I recognize that a lot of stuff is being dumped at Rest Haven's property. Maybe Mr. Brand might be able to shed some light on that as to why the debris is dumped there. My understanding is that it is very likely that that area might be turned into a cruise port to accommodate cruise vessels, and therefore they're beginning to accumulate stuff in that area for that purpose. The stuff would be pushed into the ocean.
Mr. Stanley, let me say this about that particular
Property.
The general public would recall that the Nevis Island government would have acquired that property some years ago. And the previous owner appears to have done some cleaning on the other side of the road and dumped the debris in the area that has been dumped. I must say, Mr. Stanley, that it's an issue that have occupied our consideration, because it is well known that to this point the NIA would not have settled the outstanding issue of payment with the previous owner from since the acquisition. The acquisition was done on the NRP, and that is still an issue that the government is seeking to settle in terms of compensation. It's a strange occurrence, Mr. Stanley, and I cannot sit here tonight and tell you where it is going or where it is headed, because there is still a lot of moving parts in the background. But the government has been trying as well to attract an investor, because we feel that that's a site that can do with a reasonable sized marina that can bring some additional development and activity in the area. So in terms of the dumping of the aggregates and debris and so on there, it was not something that the NIA, or practically because the NIA is theoretically the owners of that property now, regardless of the non-payment that was involved with. It was the former owner who would have placed them there. And like I said, there is some stuff going on in the background that I would probably want to leave with you.
Well, I must say that it was nice to see 2 cruise ships in our harbour.
At once.
Yes. And it tells me that the effort of the NIA is still ongoing with reference to tourism and cruise ship arrivals, and therefore kudos to you fellas in the hot seat or the controlling seat or governing seats with reference to the Navy's Island Administration.
I wanted to just to comment on that, Mr. Brand. But in your campaign, in the last campaign, not you, but your party did mention of that intention or that prospect of building the extending, is it the Deepwater Harbor to facilitate the cruise ships?
Yes,
did that overheard that?
We do actually have a concept / proposal for the expansion of the Deepwater port to facilitate cruise. That is something that has been proposed, and it's something that I know that persons are showing some interest in, to ensure that happens. We also are looking at the expansion of the Deepwater port itself, because we are of the view that based on the position of Nevis can become a major transshipment point for the entire Caribbean. And I think that if we are to look well into the future, and there would definitely needs to be some major expansion at the Long Point facility, either to continue the expansion in terms of being a transshipment point, or to be able to accommodate cruise tourism. There are a number of ideas floating around as it regards to that, and I guess in the short to medium term we will be able to come to a final decision as to how we are going to deal with that and what we are going to do with it.
I'm not sure if I am on the same page as you are, but are you talking about the Long Point facility and also the Rest Haven facility?
Two separate
areas,
yes.
For the same purpose?
No. The Rest Haven facility, the idea of the government is to be able to construct a marina in that area.
Okay.
Right? Marina where you can have some shops and so on and so forth in that facility. At the Long Point facility, the consideration is to extend the port to be able to accommodate cruise, as well as to extend it also to be able to become a cargo transshipment point for the entire Caribbean. So there is a number of ideas and so on floating around. We just basically need to see in which direction we will go.
Maybe that perhaps can entertain a debate in terms of going that expansion for transshipment with therefore increased cargo usage and handling and all that.
Yes.
Plus now passenger. Sure. Maybe that
Yes,
is
like-
for an interesting discussion.
Like I said, it's a consideration. I don't think that the government has finalized a final position, so to speak.
That's why I say it would be good for discussion.
Okay. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, somehow it's quite an easy thing for the public to get on board with the idea of what you mentioned for the West Haven area for some reason, and I suppose that's the same reason why Mr. Stanley is questioning the aggregates and thinking about pushing them into the water and extending the land. Somehow the public always feel and that is a nice place to build a marina or something to the extent where it's highly attractive to tourism. And I think one time I've heard high-end shops and all these type of stuff. Yeah, the public somehow fantasize about that to a great extent because so many people have told me that. And one time when they did some landscaping, clean down the area, everybody was excited like something was going to be happening there, but it was just to keep the land well kept, really. So the public sometimes must be listened to. They sometimes have quite an informal input, but you must listen to the public sometimes and take what they're saying on board.
Absolutely.
And you are their representative, not you, but the government are their representative, and somehow that property is being a place viewed by the public in a sense that something towards tourism can take place there.
Well, the area is zoned for tourism, so it would be prudent for the NIA to give serious consideration for tourism development. Yeah, I agree with that.
Mr. Brand, as you mentioned that term zoned,
Yes.
and you are from your background in terms of profession, architect, and stuff like that, and I always wondered, why is it necessary? Why do we do zoning? And then, for instance, you just said that area is zoned for that particular thing. And then when a developer decides now, okay, well, let me do this thing here, in terms of requirements, and be able to persuade you again that it is good for tourism. Let me finish. I thought that once you did a master plan and you say, well, that area is good for that, then you wouldn't need the other red tape going forward to then convince you again that it is good to put this there. Go ahead.
Well, I am happy that you raised this issue because we have been working long and hard on the Navy's physical development plan for some time. I believe it's presently now in the public domain for some scrutiny and some suggestion and so on. But I think, Webbo, that if we are serious about holistic development, I believe that our zoning laws, our zoning proposal, the zoning concept for the island of Nevis basically have to be a bit more stringent and followed. For example, it doesn't make much sense, Webbo, to have a housing development and then in the middle of a housing development you have a mechanic shop. Yes, I understand that people own property and people own land and so on and so forth, and someone would basically come with a proposal and say that they want to put this or they're building a shed for this particular purpose. Based on the zoning plan, when we say no, or when planning department say no, we become enemy of the state that you are trying to deprive people. But I think, Webbo, that if we are serious about our holistic development, we have had Pinny's industrial site, we have had Long Point industrial site. It does not make sense to have a residence in an industrial site, or vice versa. The island of Nevis is zoned for particular types of development. Along the coast, Pinny's, from all the way down Pinny's, go all the way down to maybe as far as Newcastle, for example, right along the coast. That entire area, to the best of my recollection, is zoned for tourism. And when you see something like a mechanic shop or something that is going to come into conflict with the zone, then it becomes a problem, and people think that you are trying to deprive them of some development or something. But the island is zoned for certain particular development.
So here's the reality that kicks in now.
Yes.
So you're of the Concerned Citizens movement.
Yes.
And you have this zoning plan, this concept is a long-term thing. But Edric is of the St. John's People's Party.
Yes.
And then he says, well, now you're supposed to be able to put his thing anywhere. Who do you think will get the most votes? Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good evening.
Good evening.
You're on the air, could you go ahead?
Good evening.
Mr. Brown just made a statement about zoning of land areas. Does this relate to housing projects when persons have things like, say, a bar in the village? Thank you very much.
Yes.
Bakola, yes, in housing projects, you know, long time ago we used to have these mom and pops shops. I think that the difficulty that we are now having is there is now a lot of conversion of old residences into these shops and bars, and one of the difficulty that we are now seeing and experiencing is that while those mom and pop stores long time ago used to sell bread and cheese and no noise, I think that the major issue is now is coming as it regards to noise in those residential areas. And let's face it, the minute you begin to allow someone to probably sell chicken and chips, nothing wrong with that, once you begin to sell certain products or certain food types, the projection of noise and that kind of things follows. And that is one of the things that we are wrestling with. How?
But you got laws where that is concerned, and those things are licensed, and you must get permission and so on. So you don't have to zone it out, because you have the laws. What happens is, and it's going to where I was going with the St. John's People's Party and your party, putting things in place and on paper is one thing, but then if you, for instance, hypothetically continue to talk about this zoning thing, and then Edric comes up with the St. John's People's Party and start to say, oh, they're just depriving the guys of a living and so on and so forth, all of a sudden you won't be there. And so when the St. John's People's Party head leader Edric gets in, then that thing is nullified, right, Naya?
Well, I don't know. You mean we have mechanic shop in housing areas on the Edric then, yeah?
Right, because he would be the one who the people support.
Yeah.
Based on his...
You're keeping down the people, yeah.
His idea.
Yes. Well,
so is that not the reality?
Well,
it's a harsh reality.
It's a reality, but at the same time, you create a kind of public nuisance in certain areas that you are trying to. It's a very difficult balance. You are trying to accommodate the business person to try and make sure that they can earn a living or get ahead, and you're also trying to accommodate the residences who can be comfortable in the so it's a difficult balance. And I think that oftentimes when you see certain applications come to our planning department, one of the things that we often do, we try to do a survey, a public survey of persons in the immediate environs.
And what if they don't come and it appears?
Then we have another set of challenges.
Right, but that's what separates you and Naya and I from you, and Naya and I from Edric. You guys are leaders, heavyweights. So you are designed to deal with those difficult issues, not correct?
That's correct.
I always tell my folks, difficult does not necessarily mean impossible.
Impossible. That is true. That is true.
Who's got the last word?
Well, we must
Thank you.
say congratulations to the judgment, and it tells the NRP to get their act together, do their homework, and support the leadership with sound legal advice before they make blunders.
This program repeats tomorrow at 10 o'clock, following the VON News Minute. Join the Honorable Matt Brantley tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock for On Demand. Thank you all again for joining us. This is your voice in the community, thought that get results. You all have a wonderful evening.
Views and opinions expressed in the preceding program were solely those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views